The library of our Beacon Hill brownstone always smelled like old leather and unearned superiority. I walked in expecting dinner, but I walked into an ambush. My father, David, didn't offer me a seat. He offered me a single sheet of paper, sliding it across the antique mahogany table like a subpoena. It was an eviction notice. "We are restructuring the family assets, Athena," he said, his voice as dry as the sherry in his glass. "Samantha's luxury lifestyle brand is launching next month. She needs studio space. Your room has the best light." My mother, Lisa, didn't even look up from her wine. "It's just business, darling. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community." I didn't slam the door. Slamming doors implies you want to be heard, and I had stopped trying to be heard in this house a decade ago. I walked up the spiraling staircase, past the oil portraits of ancestors who would have despised David's gambling and Lisa's vanity, and entered my room. It was the smallest bedroom in the house, originally a servant's quarters, but it was the only place that felt real. While David and Lisa toasted to their restructuring downstairs, I didn't pack my clothes. Clothes are replaceable. I went straight to the safe in the back of my closet and pulled out 7 years of research journals. My mother, Lisa, always loved to categorize us. To her, the world was divided into stars and audience members. Samantha was the star, the golden child, the visionary who needed $45,000 a month to maintain her aesthetic. I was the audience, the scapegoat, the one born to facilitate the brilliance of others. "Athena is reliable," she would say to her friends at brunch, her voice dripping with a pity that masked her disdain. "She doesn't have Samantha's spark, but she's very good at paperwork." She meant it as a terminal diagnosis of my personality. She thought she was insulting me. She didn't realize that in the real world, the people who do the paperwork are the ones who own the kingdom. They call it passivity. They look at a quiet person and see a doormat. But I call it the compound interest of silence. That is the thing about being the invisible one in a house full of narcissists. You become a part of the furniture, and because you are furniture, they say everything in front of you. I knew about David's offshore gambling debts before my mother did. I knew Samantha was buying her Instagram followers from a click farm in Eastern Europe while claiming organic growth. And I knew that the family fortune they were so proudly restructuring had actually run dry 5 years ago. I opened the last journal and checked the patent filing numbers. They were secure. This was the irony they were too arrogant to see. They thought they were living off an endless stream of old money, a magical faucet that just kept running. They didn't know I was the plumber. When my grandmother died, she didn't leave the trust to David. She knew he would liquidate it for sports cars and status. She left the entire portfolio to a blind shell company, giving me sole executive power the day I turned 21. For years, I had quietly managed the assets, investing my own biotech profits back into the family accounts, keeping the lights on, keeping the champagne flowing, just to see if they would ever, even once, treat me with dignity without being paid to do it. I had run this family like a silent CEO, subsidizing their delusions because I craved a connection I was never going to get. But tonight, the subsidy ended. I looked around the room one last time. They wanted the space for a studio? They could have it. I placed the eviction notice on my empty desk. It wasn't a tragedy. It was a receipt. I wasn't being kicked out of my home. I was finally liquidating a bad investment. I picked up my box of journals and walked out into the hallway. The air smelled of expensive perfume and rotting foundations. I checked my watch. The launch party was tomorrow night. That was perfect. I wouldn't just leave. I would attend. And I would bring the board meeting to them. The next evening, the brownstone did not look like a home. It looked like a showroom for a life nobody in this family could actually afford. My parents had transformed the entire ground floor into a shrine to Samantha's ego. Giant posters of her face hung over the wainscoting, and the air was thick with the scent of imported lilies and desperation. I was coming down the stairs with my final box of books when my father intercepted me. He was wearing a tuxedo that strained slightly at the buttons, his face flushed with the manic energy of a man playing the role of a billionaire. He didn't ask how my packing was going. He blocked my path and shoved a silver tray of champagne flutes into my hands. If you are going to stay under this roof for another 24 hours, Athena, you will earn your keep, he hissed, his voice low so the guests wouldn't hear. The catering staff is short-handed. Circulate, don't speak unless spoken to. And try to look less like a funeral director. It ruins the vibe. I looked at the tray. I could have dropped it. I could have thrown the crystal glasses against the wall and screamed the truth right then. But I didn't. Rage is a waste of energy, unless it is focused. I took the tray. I walked into the crush of people, moving like a ghost through the party. I served drinks to men who had less intelligence than my lab mice, and women who looked at me with the vague, polite pity reserved for the help. I found Samantha in the center of the drawing room, holding court with a group of potential investors. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than the average annual salary, laughing that practiced, tinkling laugh she had perfected for her live streams. When she saw me approaching with the tray, her eyes lit up with malicious delight. She gestured for me to come closer, treating me like a prop in her performance. "Oh, look, everyone," Samantha cooed, grabbing a glass without saying thank you. "This is my big sister, Athena. She is taking a little break from her science projects to help us out tonight. She is so supportive of my vision. Isn't that sweet?" The group murmured their approval, looking at me like I was a well-trained golden retriever. One of the investors, a man with a spray tan and a suit that cost too much, leaned in. "And what do you do, dear?" he asked, looking at my plain black dress. I adjusted the tray. "I work in waste management," I said quietly. "I specialize in disposing of toxic assets." Samantha laughed, loud and sharp, cutting me off before I could elaborate. "She is so funny," she said, steering the group away. "Just a little eccentric. Ignore her." I retreated to the shadows near the library door, my pulse steady, my mind recording every slight, every insult. Then, the music died down. My father tapped a spoon against his glass, standing on the bottom step of the grand staircase. The room fell silent. He beamed, raising his hands like a benevolent king addressing his subjects. "Tonight is historic," he announced, his voice booming. "We are not just launching a brand, we are launching a legacy. And to prove our total commitment to Samantha's vision, Lisa and I have made a decision. We are liquidating the dormant sovereign investment fund effectively immediately. $2 million of family capital will be transferred tomorrow morning to capitalize this venture." The room erupted in applause. Samantha squealed and hugged her mother, but in the corner, I felt the blood freeze in my veins. The sovereign fund wasn't dormant. It wasn't family capital. It was the operating account for my private biotech research. It held the payroll for my team, the fees for my patent filings, and the grants I had secured independently. They weren't just kicking me out of my house. They were looting my life's work to pay for a vanity project that would be bankrupt in 6 months. They were trying to rob me. I set the tray down on a side table. The glass clinked, a sharp sound that nobody heard over the applause. My father looked at me across the room, raising his glass in a mock toast, his eyes cold and triumphant. He thought he had won. He thought he had stripped me of everything. He didn't know that by trying to break the lock, he had just triggered the alarm. The doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite chime. It was a heavy, resonant sound that cut through David's speech like a gavel hitting a block. My father froze, his glass still raised in the air, annoyed at the interruption of his coronation. He lowered his hand, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "That will be legal counsel," he announced to the room, regaining his composure. "I had the papers drawn up this afternoon. We are not wasting a single second. This is how business is done, ladies and gentlemen, fast, decisive." He gestured for me to get the door, snapping his fingers twice. I didn't move. I didn't have to. The door opened on its own, pushed by a heavy hand. Mr. Sterling stepped into the foyer. If you have never met Arthur Sterling, imagine a man who looks like he was carved out of granite and dressed by a tailor who specializes in intimidation. He was the managing partner of the Sterling Family Trust, a man my father had spent 30 years trying to impress and failing. David's face lit up with a sycophantic joy that was painful to watch. He practically sprinted across the room, hand extended, eager to show off his important guest to the investors. "Arthur!" David boomed, his voice pitching up an octave. "I didn't expect you to deliver the paperwork personally. Now that is service. Come in, come in. Have a drink. We were just toasting the new venture." Mr. Sterling didn't take David's hand. He didn't even slow down. He walked past my father, as if he were a coat rack, his eyes scanning the room with the clinical detachment of a coroner entering a morgue. The room went quiet. The investors sensed the shift in atmospheric pressure. "You don't ignore the host at his own party, unless you own the building." David turned, confused, his smile faltering. "Arthur? The papers?" "Over here." Sterling stopped. He wasn't looking at the posters of Samantha. He wasn't looking at Lisa, who was preening by the fireplace. He was looking at me. I was standing in the shadows of the library door, holding a tray of empty, sticky glasses, wearing a dress that made me look like the help. Our eyes met. I gave a microscopic nod. He walked toward me. The crowd parted instinctively, creating a wide aisle between the Golden Girl's shrine and the Invisible Sister. The only sound was the clicking of Sterling's dress shoes on the parquet floor. He stopped 2 feet in front of me. He ignored the tray. He ignored the stain on my sleeve. He straightened his tie, clasped his hands behind his back, and bowed his head. It wasn't a nod. It was a bow of deference. "Madam Chairwoman," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried to every corner of the silent room. I set the tray down on a stack of Samantha's promotional flyers. I straightened my spine. "I am listening, Mr. Sterling. The board is assembled," he continued, treating the stunned silence of the room as if it were an empty conference hall. "We have reviewed the proposal to liquidate the sovereign fund operating capital. Given the complete lack of collateral and the projected bankruptcy of the recipient entity within 3 months, we advise a hard no." David let out a sound that was half laugh, half choke. "Chairwoman? What is this?" "Arthur. She's the waitress. She's my daughter. Give me the papers." Sterling finally turned to look at David. The look was not kind. It was the look a wolf gives to a stray dog that has wandered into its den. Mr. Sterling didn't open a folder. He didn't hand over a check. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a remote control. He pointed it at the wall, where a projector was displaying Samantha's logo. The logo flickered and died. In its place, a legal document appeared, crisp and undeniable in high definition. It wasn't a transfer order, it was the trust deed. And at the top, in bold, black letters, it listed the officers of the holding company. There was only one name, Athena Vance. The room didn't just go silent, it stopped breathing. David didn't faint. Narcissists don't faint when they are exposed, they attack. He lunged for the projector, his face a mask of purple rage, screaming that it was a forgery, a prank, a hack. "It's a lie," he roared, knocking a vase of white lilies off the table. "That girl is a zero. She is nothing. I am the head of this family." Mr. Sterling didn't flinch. He simply stepped between my father and the equipment, his presence like a riot shield. He held up a hand, and 2 large security guards I hadn't noticed before stepped out from the hallway shadows. David froze. The physical threat was neutralized, but the psychological violence was just beginning. "Sit down, David," Sterling said. His voice wasn't asking. "Or I will have you removed from the premises of my client's property immediately." My client's property. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Lisa let out a small, strangled whimper. She looked at the guests, the socialites, the investors, the people she lived to impress, and saw them backing away, phones out, recording the collapse of the House of Vance. "There is one more thing," Sterling announced, turning back to the room. The late matriarch anticipated this precise scenario. She left a codicil to be played in the event of a contested succession. He pressed a button on the remote. The legal document on the wall faded. In its place, a video began to play. The image was grainy, recorded years ago. But the woman on the screen was unmistakable. My grandmother. She was sitting in her high-backed chair, wearing her pearls and a look of absolute disappointment. "Hello, David." "Hello, Lisa," the video grandmother said. Her voice was sharp, the way it used to be before the dementia took the edges off. "If you are seeing this, it is because you tried to liquidate the assets I expressly protected. I knew you would." You never met a dollar you didn't want to turn into a compliment. The room was dead silent. David was trembling. Not with sorrow, but with the vibration of a man whose reality is being deleted in real time. I bypassed you, David, not because I didn't love you, but because you are a black hole, she continued, her eyes staring straight into the camera, straight into his soul. You consume. You do not create. And you, Lisa, you treated your children like accessories. You picked the shiny one to wear, and threw the sturdy one in the closet. I watched my parents. And in that moment, I understood something profound about the architecture of arrogance. We think narcissists are made of stone, impenetrable and strong, but they aren't. They are houses of cards. Their entire existence is built on a single structural delusion. I am special. I am superior. I am the main character. When you pull that card out, the collapse isn't gradual. It is total. My grandmother's voice softened on the screen. Athena, I know you are listening. You are the only one who ever watered my plants without being asked. You are the only one who knows that money is just stored labor. You earned this, my dear. Not by blood, but by character. Do not let them bully you. You are the CEO now. Dismiss the staff if they don't perform. The video cut to black. Lisa wasn't crying because she missed her mother. She was crying because the audience she had spent 30 years cultivating was looking at her with the one thing she couldn't survive: pity. She wasn't the queen of Beacon Hill anymore. She was just a cruel woman who had bet on the wrong horse. Samantha stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, looking from the blank wall to me, realizing that the sister she had mocked 5 minutes ago was the only reason she wasn't homeless. David slumped into a chair, the fight draining out of him. The illusion was gone. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, he didn't see a disappointment. He saw the bank manager, and he was terrified. The silence in the room didn't last. It broke the moment the screen went dark, shattered by the sound of expensive heels clicking rapidly against the parquet floor. The guests were fleeing. There were no polite goodbyes, no thank you notes. The socialites and investors simply evaporated, desperate to distance themselves from the stench of failure. In their world, bankruptcy was contagious, and the Vances had just been diagnosed as terminal. Within 2 minutes, the drawing room was empty save for the 4 of us and Mr. Sterling. The air was still thick with the scent of lilies, but now it smelled like a funeral. Sterling cleared his throat. He didn't look at my parents with pity. He looked at them like a forensic accountant inspecting a crime scene. We have completed the audit of the maintenance accounts, David, he said, opening a new file on his tablet. The numbers are aggressive. You haven't just been spending your stipend. You have been siphoning funds designated for the structural repair of this historic landmark to pay for cosmetic surgeries and bot farms. He looked up, his eyes cold. That is embezzlement. It is grand larceny against a trust you do not control. I have the paperwork here to file criminal charges. Or, the chairwoman can authorize an immediate seizure of all personal assets to recoup the debt. David made a sound like a wounded animal. He looked at me, his eyes wide and wet, stripping away 30 years of arrogance to reveal the terrified child underneath. Athena, please, he whispered. We are your flesh and blood. You can't put your father in jail. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a notification from the family banking app. It was an automated request, scheduled for the 1st of the month. Authorization request, monthly allowance, David and Lisa Vance. Amount, $45,000. I stared at the screen. For years, I had approved this request without a second thought. I had viewed it as the cost of doing business. The rent I paid to be part of a family that didn't want me. But as I looked at my father's trembling hands and my mother's ruined makeup, I realized the truth about phantom wealth. They had spent their entire lives confusing having with owning. They had the clothes, the cars, the address, they had the lifestyle. But they never owned the power. Power isn't what you spend. Power is what you can walk away from. They were never the kings of this castle. They were squatters, in a reality I had constructed for them. I had let them live in a phantom world because I thought if I made them comfortable enough, they might eventually love the architect. But you cannot buy love from people who only know how to consume. I looked up from the phone. My father was reaching out, his hand shaking. Athena, he pleaded. We can fix this. Just sign the authorization. We'll be better. I remembered the dinner table last night. I remembered the eviction notice sliding across the mahogany. I remembered him telling me I needed to learn the value of earning something. You were right, Dad, I said softly. My voice didn't echo. It landed. You told me I needed to understand what it means to stand on my own 2 feet. I agree. I tapped the screen. The button turned red. Denied. The notification vanished. The lifeline was cut. I reached into the pocket of my black dress and pulled out the crumpled piece of paper David had given me 24 hours ago, the eviction notice. I smoothed it out on the table, right next to the empty champagne glasses. This is still valid, I said. But the names are wrong. I looked at Samantha. She was frantically refreshing her banking app, watching her credit limit drop to 0 in real time. And Samantha, I added, the trust owns the copyright to your brand name, your logo, and your inventory. You are fired. I turned back to my parents. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. Take your clothes. Leave the furniture. It belongs to the trust. David dropped to his knees. It wasn't a metaphor. He literally collapsed to the floor, sobbing into his hands. Lisa just stared at the wall, catatonic. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. I expected guilt. I expected heartbreak. But all I felt was the cool, clean sensation of a balance sheet, finally zeroing out. I nodded to Mr. Sterling. He held the door open for me. I walked out of the drawing room, past the posters of my sister, past the lies, and out into the cool Boston night. I didn't look back. The board meeting was adjourned. 6 months is a long time in a research cycle, but it is nothing in a lifetime. I sold the brownstone. The proceeds were enough to fully fund the construction of the Vance Center for Biochemical Innovation in Cambridge. I am standing in my office now. It has glass walls, and from here, I can see 20 scientists working on problems that actually matter. The air is sterile, filtered, and clean. It smells like progress. It smells like freedom. I check my email. There is a notification from the family account. I still manage it, though the balance is significantly lower. I wired the monthly stipend this morning. It is enough for a 2-bedroom condo in Florida, groceries, and basic utilities. It is not enough for galas. It is not enough for bots. Samantha is working as a shift manager at a clothing store in the mall. David and Lisa are retired, living the quiet life they always claimed they wanted but never actually practiced. I walk over to the wall where I have hung a single framed document. It isn't a diploma. It isn't an award. It is the eviction notice David wrote for me that night in the library. I keep it there to remind myself of the moment they pushed too far. The moment the silent partner became the majority shareholder. People think power is about noise. They think it is about shouting orders and throwing parties and demanding attention. But they are wrong. Real power is quiet. Real power is doing the work when no one is watching. Real power is knowing that you don't have to fight for a seat at the table if you own the building. They thought silence was weakness. They forgot that you have to be quiet to hear the lock click open. If you are the one doing the work in the dark, keep building. Your time is coming. If you've ever been the one doing the work while someone else took the credit, this is your sign. Share this story if you're building your own empire in the dark.